Welcome back to Gotcha Interact. Today we're going to be talking about Kinich and his pre-release, talking about everything that we know at this point in time. Now there are going to be future revisions over his kit, probably mostly talking about different types of damage changes, how well he's going to be doing in terms of like damage multipliers and whatnot. But basically what we're going to be talking about today is just the overall look at his kit, how he's probably going to work upon his release. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into his normal attacks, his skills, and his burst, and then looking at some passives as well. Now his normal attacks have nothing special to look at, but it does state that in his normal attack, after using his elemental skill, which we'll talk about in a second, his mid-air swing attack that he does with his elemental skill, he can perform a mid-air normal attack before landing. So if you do use that to kind of do traversal type techniques, when you use a skill to kind of pull yourself up, which once again we'll talk about in a second, you can do a normal attack before landing and then doing that as well.
Guys, with Natlin coming up sooner than you might expect, I have one question for you. How are your savings looking? Lubar is a service that allows you to top up on Genesis crystals for a cheaper price so you can get that last minute grab of that character you've had your eyes set on. It's super easy and 100% safe because Lubar only needs your UID. No emails, no passwords. Many people have left positive reviews, and Lubar offers 24/7 live support in case you need help with any purchase. You can also top up your Star Rail account in the same way. After making a purchase, Loopbar promises delivery in 30 minutes, but I got my Genesis crystals in just about 5 minutes. They have also proven themselves trustworthy through other creators like Dukaja, Jello Impact, Supera Tom, Mujin, and Tevat Times. So what are you waiting for? Use the link we have put in the description to top up today, and also thanks to Loopbar for sponsoring the video. Now, back to the content.
Now with his skill, it is called Canopy Hunter Riding High. When no opponents are nearby, he fires a grappling hook forward and swings in midair, and this skill's cooldown is decreased by 60%. When an opponent is present, he will fire the hook at the target opponent and enter Night Soul's Blessing at 0 Night Soul points. This can be held, and when held, he can aim the grappling hook. That's just really the only difference. Kinich's Night Soul's Blessing lasts for 10 whole seconds and generates 2 Night Soul points every second. In this state, Kinich will hook onto a nearby opponent and perform a variable attack. Using a normal attack will perform a loop shot around the grapple target based on the current movement direction that you are going forward towards, dealing dendro damage with the Night Soul attribute, and generating 3 Night Soul points as well. A mid-air swing damage is also considered elemental skill damage. When Night Soul points are at maximum, which is going to be 20, he can use the elemental skill, Scale Spiker Cannon, to consume all his Night Soul points to deal dendro damage with the Night Soul attribute. When he uses this, it can be held, and Kinich can aim at his target. After firing the cannon, Kinich will try to grapple its target. While in Night Soul's Blessing, Kinich will generate a dead zone beside an opponent he has grappled to or fire the cannon at. When he enters this zone, the Night Soul's Blessing will be cancelled, and Kinich will gain 4 Night Soul points. If the grapple connection should snap due to exceeded distance or some other reason, using a normal attack will establish a new connection with a nearby opponent before performing a loop shot.
Looking at Kinich's burst, this is called Hail to the Almighty Dragon Lord, and of course this is referring to Ajal that we see in the trailer. Now with his burst, he's going to unleash the power of Ajal the Almighty Dragon Lord on a limited, conditional, restricted, contractual, partial, and temporary basis, dealing AoE dendro damage. Ajal will unleash his Dragon Breath at intervals as well, dealing AoE dendro damage. If Kinich is in the Night Soul's Blessing state when this is used, this current blessing duration is extended by 2 seconds. So just as we looked at the skill that Vixen went over, my thought here is that you do want to use the burst while you are in that skill state. That way you are getting the extension of it. And then looking quickly at Ajal's interval damage. So you're going to use the burst here, and it's going to do a set amount of damage, and then also you can go off field, and this dragon Ajal will continue to do some AoE dendro damage that lasts for 15 seconds, and the cooldown of the burst is 18 seconds. And so some of you might have known, as we look into the passives here in a sec, a lot of you have kind of seen some speculations that Kinich will be a burning or burgeon DPS, and also with the thought of Emilie in mind, which we'll talk about a little bit as later. My initial thought on that is that this is good that Kinich will have some off-field dendro application with the burst.
Now let's go ahead and talk about some passives. The Price of Desolation is his first passive, and it states that when in Night Soul's Blessing, opponents hit by Kinich's elemental skill damage will enter the Desolation state, and when affected by burning or burgeon reaction damage, they will restore 7 Night Soul points to him. Night Soul points can be gained this way once every 0.8 seconds. The Desolation state will persist until this instance of Kinich's Night Soul's blessing ends.
Looking at Kinich's second passive, this is called Flame Spirit Pact. This states that when a nearby party member triggers a Night Soul burst, Kinich will gain 1 stack of Hunter's experience that lasts 15 seconds with a max of 2 stacks. When Kinich uses Canopy Hunter Riding High's Scale Spiker Cannon, all stacks will be consumed, with each stack increasing the damage dealt by this cannon shot by 320% of Kinich's attack. So obviously a very considerable damage increase to his massive hit within his skill state, and something you will want to be getting use out of. Now, his third passive is something that's more tied to just kind of his exploration talent, if you want to call it that, because there will be some mechanics in Natlan when it does come out that allows you to take use of this. So it's not, just know that it's nothing really specific to combat. So we're going to kind of skip over it for now, just because it's not really relevant to the actual kit and talking about teams and what Kinich does for the combat scenarios.
So overall, looking at everything, now that we've just talked about the kit and actually just looked at each part of the kit, now let's actually talk about the kit. Let's look at actually what are our thoughts looking at each part of it. It seems like obviously we've seen looking at burning and burgeon reaction damage in the passive talent, that's going to help a lot more, getting him more Night Soul points, and obviously he's going to be starting with 0 Night Soul points whenever you're going and using his skill. Now it seems like you're going to be using your skill and then doing a bunch of normal attacks to get more stacks or more Night Soul points. At this point in time, then once you get to a maximum amount of stacks, you're going to use your skill again to do basically a huge Scale Spiker Cannon damage hit. Now this has amazing damage multipliers at this point in time, so honestly, a very big idea here. Never mind that these normal attacks are going to give 3 Night Soul points with a maximum of 7, and every second you're getting 2 Night Soul points. So it's very easy, it seems, to get the maximum amount of Night Soul points to get with this idea. But the idea here is that he's going full blown into either burning or burgeon damage. It kind of seems like he's doing a bunch of normal attacks that might do okay damage. Even his loop shot damage might be nice and okay. But honestly, the biggest idea here is trying to get maximum Night Soul points to do a bigger hit off of that skill hit. Now, I don't know about your Rift, but it seems like he's got something really cool and very interesting. I know some of the traversal was joked around about being very similar to Withering Waves and whatnot, and how he can kind of go a little bit farther than kind of their grapple hook shot. So there's a lot of things I think he does extremely well in. I think burning obviously is going to be very good for him, never mind his passive talent, and then giving him more Night Soul points, 7 at that, but also the idea of just, constant dendro application. My biggest thing about burning is getting a damage dealer that is going to be dendro. Even with burning, you don't want a character who's doing pyro, because you don't want too much pyro or else the dendro on an enemy goes away. So to have a dendro character constantly applying it, as you can see here with the normal attacks as well as these skill hits, it's going to be extremely good to have a dendro character as a burning DPS rather than a pyro character as a burning DPS.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point you make. And going to another thing that I think some people, not everyone, will probably be confused a little bit on, but looking at like the Night Soul Blessing, the Night Soul Burst mechanic specifically, if we go back to Kinich's second passive, it does state that when a nearby party member is triggering that Night Soul Burst, Kinich is getting those stacks he can get of Hunter's experience. He can get up to 2 stacks of that, and that's going to increase that big massive hit that we keep talking about. So I think it's pretty important, if you are focusing on that hit, you're obviously wanting to get those Night Soul bursts off, which can be Kinich himself or another character. So later on in the future, we might talk about some other characters that release in Natlan, maybe in the Mualani pre-release, or especially the Kachina pre-release, just because she's a 4-star, she'll be a lot more easily obtained. She might actually turn out to be an okay character to use as a flex character in a burning team, just because Geo doesn't really mess up the burning reaction at all. So, and you would be getting crystallized for that matter. So just using all those things, going back to Night Soul Burst, if we look in Kinich's talent for his skill again, it does talk about some of those dendro damage instances where it says he'll deal dendro damage with the Night Soul attribute. And what it means there is when it deals dendro damage with the Night Soul attribute, that's basically the Night Soul Burst attack, essentially. And in that second passive, every 15 seconds, as long as he's doing a hit that's like that, he's going to gain one of those stacks to really increase his Scale Spiker Cannon hit. One of my other thoughts that comes to mind is, I think a lot of people will bring up Al-Haytham just because he's the other major dendro DPS, and they're probably going to try to compare a lot of things. But honestly, I just don't know about that right off the bat, because they just work so differently. I think Kinich is really going to fall off when you try to use him in a spread type team, just because nothing in his kit, nothing in the passives actually help do anything with it. I mean, it's probably, I can't say it's not going to work. It's obviously going to work because he's going to be doing dendro damage as an on-fielder, so it will work. Like we've gone through, the kit is just really pushing for burning. You're going to get a lot more of those Night Soul stacks when you are burning or using a burgeon team. It's all leading up to, like you said, that scale spiker cannon hit. And I do think some of the other damage will be okay, especially the burst damage itself, as well as Ajaw's off-field damage. I think that'll be good, and like I mentioned earlier, is good for the team in general in a burning sense because it's constant and continual dendro application, which if you are pulling Emilie, you should go after Kinich, because I think they'll be a very good dynamic duo, both of them having to do specifically in their kits with the burning reaction. So I think it's pretty obvious that those two will do well together, and then for your other 2 slots, you could just use the other dynamic duo, Bennett Xiangling, because it's really good, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But you could also use characters like Dia. Dia has pretty good off-field application. That'll last a while. She can be your sustain. She has pretty okay damage, but she's gonna, apply a lot of pyro. Toma is the same thing, especially from off-field. And, with building Toma for burgeon specifically, that does open up the avenue in my mind to do a Kinich team on a burgeon side of things. You could do Kinich with Emilie, or maybe you just drop Emilie out of the picture here since you're focusing more on burgeon. Maybe you could use Nahida instead. But honestly, I think Emilie would work pretty well here anyways, but you are going to want an off-field hydro applicator. You could use Farina, you could use Yelan, Xingqiu. Obviously, those core 3 right there are going to be pretty good without looking, extensively into what's going to be the best, right? Not looking at this like a meta slave, okay? But you could do like Kinich, Emilie, Yelan, and Toma, and I think that would be a pretty substantial team, just because Toma is a shielder at the same time. Maybe you could do a hybrid build on him, and he can kind of help shield you as well, but you probably will want a healer. You could, instead of using Emilie, I think Baiju would actually be a really great character to use on the burgeon team, just so you do have some kind of sustain and a healer, because in the off-field hydro applicators that we do have, they don't really heal. Yes, there's Farina, but you really do want to keep her on Usia, otherwise she's not doing her job with hydro application and just damage in general. So those are some of my initial thoughts on maybe some teams you could go about with the burning and burgeon senses. If you want to try to go for a spread team, I'm not going to stop you, but I wouldn't get your hopes too high. I mean, Alhaitham, I think, is still going to sit on the throne in that regards because he is very powerful. Alhaitham is still probably number 3 in terms of the top DPSs in the game. I don't think Kinich will overthrow him, especially just because he's so different.
Kind of just jumping right on top of that, and the reason I can only say this is because I do use Alhaitham. I think the biggest thing that separates the two is not, oh, well, one's, more focused on this way or the other way. It really comes down to just skill attributes, right? When actually looking at the character's skill attributes. When looking at what we have here in terms of Kinich, he's just based off attack percent. Everything is attack percent. There is no EM built in him at all. The burning damage itself is not what you're going for. The burgeon reaction damage, obviously that's a pyro specific reaction, so you're not going for that either. The idea here is just constant dendro application. And the more idea here is to just help constantly with the burning aspect, because this is happening every 0.8 seconds. And that means that especially when you're doing this though, that you're trying to make sure that no matter what, you're doing constant burning or burgeon. Now, the idea here is that it's all based on attack percent though. On all of his things, it's just straight attack percent. There's no other type of dual scaling in his kit, whereas something like Alhaitham, a character like him, as well as a character like Tighnari, are going to do better with specifically spread teams because they are going both into attack percent and elemental mastery. And that's specifically why Kinich is almost kind of quote-unquote nerfed. Now, I'm pretty sure there are going to be people that are going to try to do the whole Kinich and then throw Nahida in the team and then throw, some electro characters in there to do a spread specific team, buff his EM, and kind of almost how we kind of use Chloron, and as well as the same way we use catching to kind of force aggravate on them, even though they don't go into elemental mastery, kind of forcing the role on them by throwing Nahida in the team to give them a huge boost to EM, as well as double, Dendro on the team, to just give them a bunch of EM, as well as running them on specific sets that can help with that. So I'm sure there is a place for it, but like Rift was talking about, you don't want to sit there and go, he's going to be best and goated for, that specific team. Now, another team we didn't even think of could be Hyperbloom. Once again, that is a team that is not going to be specifically meant for his damage. But kind of like how Alhaitham's damage isn't necessarily focused in that team either, you're focusing on having him do a good amount of damage and having Kuki, usually the Hyper Boom procer, doing a lot of extra damage as well. I think Kinich is going to be the same way. Kinich is, if you want to do a Hyper Bloom team, you're not going to be able to get that huge, scale spiker hit as consistently, because once again, that's not a damage increase. It's more or less how often can you get this, big hit. And so that's why the Burning and Burgeon is useful. It's not a, it doesn't help you necessarily get a higher damage hit. It helps your DPS, your damage per second, go faster. So that's why you want to do Burning and Burgeon. Not necessarily to say that the other ways won't work, but it's going to feel smoother and it's going to be better for Kinich to do Burning and Burgeon. Well, that's everything we've got talking about Kinich. If you guys do have any ideas on what you guys are hoping for and seeing out of him in the future, go ahead and let us know down in the comments. If you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Once again, let us know what you guys are hoping for in Kinich and if you guys are going to be pulling him as well. Thank you guys for watching the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.